Thanks, Jamie. And I also wanted to thank the organisers for the opportunity to be here. Thank you very much. I wanted to perhaps take a step back as to how it is that that particular case, which I will talk about in a bit more detail, how it came to us. So the firm that I work with, that I'm a partner of, is Lee Day, which is a firm that has been operating for 30 years now, based in London, and has always operated with the ethos of providing legal services to people who are generally the more marginalised, people who don't have the power in a relationship in which they are trying to assert their rights. So we have represented people from different parts of the world to bring cases in the UK where there is an action against either the British government or British companies. And that was the reason that I first started working for Lee Day, because I've had a history of about 15 years of working on corporate accountability for human rights abuses. And I've worked with individuals who've been adversely affected by companies in different parts of the world in circumstances where, whether they be villagers in Tanzania or mine workers in South Africa or protesters, campesinos in Peru, who are trying to assert their rights against very powerful, very politically connected companies. And what Lee Day does is then assist people to bring an action in the High Court of England and Wales against a British multinational to assert their rights to say, this company has breached my human rights, has caused massive environmental devastation to my community, and I ought to be able to obtain compensation, and to try and ensure that those individuals are able to get that compensation. Now, the compensation is obviously important for the individual, but it's also very important for raising awareness of the issues that are occurring in different parts of the world. So when we were approached to look at a case involving a British company that was accused of having been involved in modern slavery, of course, we jumped at the opportunity. It was a great opportunity to work in this area, and in an area, to be frank, that we hadn't really worked in before. As I say, my history is very much involved in corporate accountability, but mostly in circumstances where the company involved is in the extractive industries, so mining, oil and gas, sometimes in the agricultural sector. But very rarely have we looked at this from a point of view of modern slavery. So in 2014, we were told about this particular instance where there were half a dozen men who were willing to actually give evidence to ensure there was a prosecution in relation to experiences that they had been the victim of. These men were Lithuanian men who'd been trafficked into the United Kingdom from Lithuania, which is an EU country, into the United Kingdom, thinking that they were going to do work in which they would be well paid. It may have been work in a factory, it may have been work in a field. They were told different stories. But they were all trafficked into the United Kingdom and then subjected to very severe labour exploitation by a British company operated by two British individuals who basically farmed them out to different parts of the United Kingdom to work on poultry farms. And the individuals and the company involved were gangmasters. So it's a lawful occupation in the United Kingdom to be a gangmaster. You're licensed to do this. But you're supposed to ensure that your workers are paid according to minimum wages, that there is respect for the law in terms of the opportunity to rest, that you're, obviously, if you're providing accommodation, that it's not forced upon you, that you can live in different circumstances and so on. The experience of our clients was that they were worked around the clock for days and days at a time, going from one farm to another. Pretty much the only opportunity they were given to sleep was in the vans while they were travelling from one farm to another. They were subjected to humiliation and abuse, both by their supervisors while they were working, but also by a middleman, an enforcer, when they were taken back to the houses in which they were kept. They were subjected to physical abuse. The middleman bred quite vicious Rottweiler dogs, very large, aggressive dogs, which he also used against the workers to keep them in check. The workers were often not paid anything. They had their weekly wages withheld for very spurious reasons. And in any case, the amount of money that they were proposed to be paid on their wage slips was well below the minimum standards in the United Kingdom. Now, all of this occurred at least between 2008 and 2012. And the clients that we met had been liberated after they themselves went to a local citizens' advice bureau and sought refuge. They blew the whistle, effectively. Following this, they were taken into safe housing, they were given some support. The police and the public body that's required to license gangmasters did a raid, and there were about 30 workers who were liberated from the circumstance, put through the national referral mechanism. All were confirmed to be victims of modern slavery and provided the 45-day mandatory support. Thereafter, nothing much seems to have happened. So we weren't introduced to these individual men until 2014. We met with them. It was the first time that we had been engaged in a modern slavery type action. There hasn't been an action before our case against a British company, and so we had to look at what were the laws that existed to ensure that these men could get compensation from this company and from the individuals involved. And we engaged a number of different lawyers that we commonly work with, and we had to actually very creatively use the tort law system, so the common law system. It wasn't actually brought under the Modern Slavery Act. And in fact, even if we were to bring this action now, we would not be able to use the Modern Slavery Act. And that is because the Modern Slavery Act doesn't actually give rise to a tort of human trafficking. It doesn't give rise to an opportunity to bring a civil compensation claim. So we would once again have to go through a process of creatively using the torts of negligence, the torts of trespass to the person, the failure to pay according to the legislative requirements for wages. We would have to use this suite of laws to ensure that compensation was paid. So in this action, which initially we were only representing 6 men, they were the first 6 men that we actually were introduced to, and they were keen to take forward the case. Upon issuing the case, we obtained some media interest, and we've since had another 11 men come forward, and so there's another action that's proceeding for them. But the first 6, just last December, we were able to finally obtain them compensation in the hundreds of thousands of pounds. And it's the first time that there has been any kind of compensation that's been payable by a company for victims of modern slavery, and where it's actually been paid. Now, believe me, the company has been trying not to pay, but we've been enforcing in every which way we can. So it's a really important case in terms of, it gets back to this issue of, why is it that modern slavery is such a pervasive problem? Now, clearly there are some sadistic people out there, and that may be the reason that some of those people are involved in modern slavery. But we also know that this is a multi-billion-dollar industry. So let's look at what are the drivers of modern slavery, and let's try and go after where the money comes from. Try and ensure that we're actually going after the individuals and the companies that are involved in profiting from this heinous crime, and not necessarily having to always focus on the criminal outcome. Because while I say I think it's important that there be a criminal outcome, unfortunately our police, our Crown Prosecution Services are completely under-resourced. If we were to only rely on a criminal outcome and then seek compensation, we would have even fewer people being compensated. So it's important that there is this mix between the criminal and the civil side, and obviously it's important, if we can, to ensure that there is a state compensation fund. All of these things need to come into the mix. But if we only focus on one, then I think we're failing to ensure that there is the reparation for the individuals who are affected, to ensure that they can actually use the money to rebuild their lives. Thank you.
Thank you very much.